everybody, it's Bailey here. Happy New Year. I know it's midway through January, but Happy New Year anyways. I'm so happy to see you guys here this week. We are trying something new at CircleYouth with these messages, and I'm super excited to be with you in video form. Now, as I talk to you guys in this video each week, there's going to be times where I'm going to ask you to pause and talk about a question. I've got the perfect chance for you guys to give it a try right now. So pause the video after I give you the question and talk in your small groups about this. Some of you I know call them thorns and roses, Cheetos and mosquitoes, or highs and lows. Take a minute in your group to talk about what drained you over the break and what gave you life over the break. For me, what drained me over the break was the process of painting my room. My room color has been the same for 10 years, and my family was really getting on my case that I had to change it. So, over the break, we moved all my stuff out, painted all the doors and the trim in my room, and painted all the walls a new color. It was pretty exhausting, but it also felt really good at the end to have a nice brand new room. What gave me life over the break was spending time with my family, doing some puzzles, and playing a new game called Sushi Go. Let me know if you've ever played it before. I think it's super fun, and we had a blast playing together. Now, this month, our series that we're going to be talking about is called Waitlisted, and we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, waiting. Here is another question for you to discuss in your small groups. What do you hate waiting for? Pause the video and chat about it. Something that I hate waiting for is for my food to cook. You know, when you're just absolutely starving and your pizza pop is in the microwave, but somehow, even though it's only 1 minute, it feels like absolutely forever. I hate it. There's so many things that we need to wait for in life, like a ride at an amusement park, waiting for Christmas morning to come, those little 3 dots when someone's typing back to you, or waiting for your skip the dishes order to arrive at your house. Or it can even be something huge like waiting for everything to go back to normal after COVID. Sometimes waiting can feel like an eternity, especially when it's something that we really, really want. But you know, at first, maybe the waiting's kind of fun. While you wait, the anticipation is building because when the waiting's finally over, you know you're going to get that one thing that you've been waiting for so long. But what happens when the promise or the thing you're waiting for gets delayed and delayed again and again? Soon, you might start to wonder if it's ever going to happen at all, or if you should just give up hope. It's a feeling that a lot of us can identify with, and there's a lot of responses that we can have when we're in the middle of waiting. We might get frustrated, ask a bunch of questions, and be tempted to give up hope, and especially feel disappointed. Now, I'll just put it out there without sugarcoating it. There were a lot of moments in 2020 that left me waiting and disappointed. And I'm sure that each of you can think of at least one thing or more that you were looking forward to that you're disappointed about this year. For me, even though I'm super excited about youth in 2021, I'm disappointed that we can't connect in the same way that we did a few years ago. I was looking forward to sharing some awesome snacks with you guys and playing games throughout the whole church like gargoyles. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we won't do some awesome things at youth this year, because we will. I promise you we will. But it's okay to acknowledge that I still feel disappointed about it. So I want you guys to talk in your small groups for a few minutes about something that's left you disappointed recently. Is there anything that you've spent a long time waiting for that disappointed you? Go ahead and chat about those questions. Disappointments and surprises in life are something that absolutely everyone experiences. And when they hit, we can be waiting and wondering things like, why did this happen? How long will I feel this way? How do I fix it? Can anyone help me? Or maybe even, where is God in all of this? Now, if you can relate to any of those things that I just said, don't worry, you're not alone. And I want to introduce you to someone from the Bible who knows a lot about surviving some major disappointments and crisis in his life. Now, we may have talked about him before. I can't fully remember if we did, but I'll let you know his name is Paul. Now, here's some stuff about our guy, Paul. Paul spent his whole life following God. As a young Jewish man, he was a high-achieving religious student of his time, the very top of his class. But his story took its first major turn during the early years after Jesus died, when the message about Jesus was just beginning to spread. Now, as a religious leader in the Jewish faith, Paul did not follow the teachings of Jesus. In fact, he believed that the followers of Jesus were enemies of God. And this caused Paul to defend his faith by sending believers of Jesus into prison and even killing some of them. Wow, not very nice. But then something super significant happened in Paul's life. He had a personal encounter with God, and in that very moment, he decided that he wanted to follow Jesus completely. Now, when Paul met Jesus, he had no idea what God had planned for his life, but he eventually became one of the greatest Christian influencers of all time. He wrote so much of the New Testament in the Bible. He was a significant leader of the early church, and he was responsible for bringing the message about Jesus into brand new parts of the world. Despite everything good God had in store for Paul, Paul's life after starting to follow Jesus had some pretty difficult moments too, including some big crises and a lot of waiting. One of the major ways Paul was often waitlisted during his time was by being sent to prison. Ironic, isn't it? After spending so much time throwing followers of Jesus into prison, that's exactly where Paul ended up. Now, even though Paul had changed his beliefs about Jesus, many of the government and religious leaders of the day had not. In their eyes, someone talking about the message of Jesus and trying to spread it was a threat to their power, control, and the way that people thought about God. So they tried to imprison and sometimes kill followers of Jesus. So throughout Paul's life, he spent about 5 years in prison for spreading the message about Jesus. And while he was there, I wonder if he ever thought, hello, God, how am I supposed to fill your plans for my life if I keep getting thrown in jail? Every time things start going well, I'm just back again behind bars. What are you doing? Why aren't you stopping this? Hello, are you even there? We can read about one of these times that Paul was in jail in the Bible, and it's in a book called Acts. Now, the book of Acts is a book in the Bible that describes how the good news of Jesus spread around the world and how the early church began to grow and what happened to some of the key church leaders of the time, like Paul. So we're going to be reading from Acts 16 today, and it tells us about one of Paul's journeys to Macedonia and what happened to him there, along with his friend Silas. So here's how it went. I'm going to pull it up in my Bible here, and I'm just going to kind of paraphrase and let you guys know what the story is. So Paul and Silas were traveling around. They were sharing the message about Jesus and listening to where God wanted them to go. And then, during the night, one night, Paul had a dream that a Macedonian man was saying, "Hey, come and help us." And Paul recognized that his dream was from God. And so he started heading there right away. Now, once Paul and Silas finally got there, though, a couple of people grabbed Paul and Silas and led them before the authorities. They said, "Hey, these guys, they're causing some trouble. They're talking about some stuff that we don't want them to talk about." And you'll never guess what happened. The people riled up against them. The crowd all joined in, and they all attacked them. They were beaten with rods, and they were thrown into jail in the most secure part of the prison, and they had chains put onto their ankles. Did you catch all of that? After a long journey where God finally leads Paul to Macedonia, they face a major crisis. Paul and Silas are beaten up and thrown into jail for talking about Jesus. Now, chapter 16 tells us that God clearly led Paul and his friends to Macedonia to share the gospel. So if God led them there, why did they end up in prison? Did they make a mistake? Did God make a mistake? Did God put them in prison on purpose? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us why God allowed Paul and Silas to be thrown into prison. It does make it clear, though, that God didn't want them to stay there. Here's what happened next, you guys. Super cool. Paul and Silas were chilling in jail. You know, they got the shackles on their ankles. But while they're there, they weren't moping about. They weren't all depressed. They were actually praying and singing to God while they're in the middle of prison. And the other prisoners all around them were listening to them, probably thinking like, who are these crazy guys? What are they singing and praying about? They're in prison. Aren't you depressed just like us? Then in the middle of everything, there was a violent earthquake, and the foundations of the jail were all shaken up, and all of the prison doors opened up, and everyone's chains on their ankles, boom, just came loose. Paul and Silas were interrupted in their journey of talking about Jesus by disappointment and crisis. They were waiting for God's rescue, but in the meantime, while they were waiting in prison, they still found a reason to sing and worship God, even while they waited and wondered what would happen next. And then God showed up in a miraculous way and rescued Paul and Silas from prison through the earthquake. Now, even when they were waiting for God's rescue, Paul and Silas trusted that God hadn't abandoned them. And while they waited, they worshiped. And after they were rescued, they got right back to work in telling people about Jesus. They knew that God could be trusted. They trusted that God was with them. They believed that God would be faithful to them no matter what happened. You guys, it's never easy to experience disappointment and crises in life, just like Paul and Silas. I don't know, you guys probably aren't going to prison anytime soon, but we all still face disappointment. But we can always find a reason to have hope and joy because God is faithful. So, while you're waiting for hope or rescue from something, just remember that God can be trusted. The Bible is filled with so many stories and so much evidence of God's trustworthiness. So if you need more encouragement, just go and take a look and see what you can find. Remember that God is with you. He loves you so much, and He's always listening and present with us, no matter what. And last, God is faithful, no matter what happens. Paul and Silas were rescued from prison, but they chose to sing to God even when they weren't sure what was going to happen next. They understood that God is faithful to us, even when we're in the middle of waiting, and even when things don't turn out the way that we hope they will. I don't know what kind of disappointments or crises you've got in your life right now, or that you're going to face in the next few months as we still try to figure out this whole COVID thing. But when you find yourself waiting for God to rescue you, I hope that you remember what we talked about today. While you're waiting, God is faithful to you. God is faithful to you even when you're not faithful to God, even when you're losing hope, even when you're filled with all sorts of questions and doubts, and even when you're tired of waiting. Now, I just talked at you guys a whole lot, but before we wrap up, I want you guys to talk about one more question. See if you can brainstorm as a group some things you can do when you're in the middle of waiting. What are some ways that you can stay hopeful even when you're in the middle of a disappointment or in waiting for something to change or to come? Talk about this for a few minutes, and then when you come back, I'll wrap things up for us. So, I hope you were able to brainstorm some super great ideas for that. But while you're waiting for God to show up, here's a few things that I hope that you'll do. Trust that God is with you, like God was with Paul and Silas. And here's another thing. You can pray while you wait. Even if the only thing that you can say to God is to ask, "Why, God?" or "Help me," that can be enough. Also, know that God's love for you will never, ever change. He's faithful to you. Now, if you have questions about this message or anything that I talked about, ask us. You can ask me, you can ask your leaders, or even talk to your parents about it. Now, as you go about your week, think about how you can adjust your attitude when you're waiting. See you back here next week for Circle Youth Junior High. Bye, everybody.